Carl Jung exposes the dark side that controls you. In the silent dusk of the psyche, when the fading light bends into twilight shadows, there stirs a presence, soft, elusive, yet insistent. It is the shadow, the unseen twin of the self, that quiet whisper beneath the clamor of daily masks and conscious pride. Neither enemy nor friend, the shadow is a riddle carved from the forgotten depths of our being, a hidden continent beneath the ego's measured shores. It does not knock loudly. Its summons is a subtle tremor felt in the stillness before dawn, a fracture in the fortress of control we build around ourselves. To meet the shadow is to stand at the threshold of the abyss, a sacred void where light wanes and the soul confronts its concealed depths. This is not a descent into darkness as despair, but an initiation into mystery. It is the place where the ego's certainties dissolve like mist, revealing the infinite complexity beneath. The shadow's whisper calls us into a dance with what we have denied, repressed, or disowned. It beckons with a voice that is at once alluring and terrifying, for to answer is to relinquish the illusion of mastery and face the wildness within. Within this sacred dusk, the psyche's geography shifts. The persona, that carefully woven mask, loses its hold. The roles we have played, the stories we have told ourselves to be acceptable, begin to unravel. In the shadow's presence, the soul tastes its own vulnerability, the raw edges where light and dark entwine. Here lies the primordial soil of transformation, where psychic death precedes rebirth. To recognize the shadow is to acknowledge the parts of ourselves that have been cast into exile, the impulses, desires, fears, and wounds that do not fit the narrative of who we think we are. Jung called this the shadow because it follows us everywhere, a constant companion lurking at the periphery of consciousness. But it is not merely darkness. It is a complex archive of our unclaimed potentials and truths, waiting patiently for recognition. Like the alchemist's nigredo, it is the blackened stage of the soul's transformation, a symbolic death that must be endured before the light of wholeness can emerge. The ego, with its need for order and coherence, recoils from the shadow's call. It prefers the comforting light of awareness and the familiar roles of persona, but the psyche is not so easily subdued. The unconscious will press against the borders, sending dreams, projections, and emotional storms as messengers of the shadow's presence. These are not punishments but invitations, coded language from the depths urging integration, healing, and growth. In this space between light and dark, between known and unknown, the soul encounters its first great paradox. The shadow is both the source of pain and the key to liberation. To reject it is to remain fragmented, trapped in half-truths and illusion. To embrace it is to begin the sacred work of individuation, the journey toward becoming a whole and authentic self. The shadow's whisper comes like a sigh from the depths, a call to come home to parts of ourselves long forgotten or feared. It is the voice of the wild self, the instinctual, creative, and primal energies that resist the sterile confines of egoic control. This voice can sound like accusation, regret, or longing, but beneath these tones lies a deep yearning for reunion and healing. Imagine the psyche as a vast forest at twilight. The familiar path fades, swallowed by shadows that stretch like fingers through the trees. The shadow is the unknown part of this forest, the dark glen where fear and fascination meet. To enter is to risk losing oneself, yet also to discover a deeper source of life. It is here that the soul's true story begins, beyond the scripted tales of persona and societal expectation. The first step in this sacred journey is recognition, not denial or suppression. To see the shadow is to greet it with compassion, to listen without judgment. It is an act of courage, a refusal to remain safely imprisoned within the ego's narrow walls. It means opening a door to the unconscious, that hidden realm where archetypes, symbols, and the collective wisdom of humanity dwell. In myths across cultures, the descent into the underworld is a recurring motif, a hero's journey into darkness, to retrieve lost treasures. The shadow is this underworld within us, the place where our psychic gold lies buried beneath layers of fear and neglect. To answer the shadow's whisper is to embark on this mythic quest, where trials and revelations shape the soul anew. The shadow may appear as fearsome creatures or dark figures in dreams, as forbidden desires or hidden anger in waking life. It is the other within, the parts we have pushed outside ourselves because they do not fit the accepted image. But paradoxically, these exiled parts hold the key to our vitality and creativity. Without acknowledging them, the psyche remains incomplete, like a house with locked rooms and missing windows. As we stand at this threshold, the ego's need for control trembles. The shadow's whisper threatens the comfortable story of self we tell ourselves, the neat identity built on approval and predictability. But this disturbance is necessary. It shakes the foundations so that the soul may be rebuilt on firmer ground, deeper truth, and wider horizons. In the silence of this inner dusk, a sacred dialogue begins. The ego listens, hesitant but attentive, as the shadow reveals itself not as a monster, but as a guardian of authenticity. It is a keeper of secrets, a mirror reflecting the parts we deny but cannot escape. This meeting is the genesis of transformation, the first flicker of a flame that will illuminate the dark corners of the psyche. The shadow's call is a call to wholeness. It is an invitation to integrate what has been split, to bring the unconscious into consciousness, to make the hidden visible. In this integration, the self grows beyond the limited ego into a broader, more compassionate presence. The journey is arduous, for it requires facing pain and contradiction, but it is also a sacred pilgrimage toward freedom and depth. In time, the shadow becomes less a source of fear and more a source of wisdom. Its dark depths conceal treasures, creativity, passion, intuition, and profound self-knowledge. To embrace the shadow is to embrace the full spectrum of the human soul, not just its polished surfaces, but its wild, untamed heart. The shadow's whisper does not cease once heard. It becomes a guide, a constant companion on the path of individuation. Its presence ensures that the soul remains humble and awake, forever curious about the mysteries within. It reminds us that control is an illusion and that true power lies in surrender and acceptance. As the psyche journeys beyond the threshold, it learns the language of symbols, dreams, and myth, the shadow's native tongue. This language speaks of cycles, transformations, and eternal return. It tells us that death and rebirth are not events, but ongoing processes within the soul's unfolding story. The invitation to the abyss is not a call to despair, but a sacred summons to depth. It is the beginning of a lifelong dialogue between light and shadow, conscious and unconscious, ego and self. Through this dialogue, the soul awakens to its own mystery, its own radiant and shadowed nature. So let us listen now, with open hearts and steady breath to the shadow's whisper. Let us honor the silence where it speaks and the darkness where it dwells. For in this sacred encounter lies the path to true freedom, the freedom to be wholly, authentically ourselves. The shadow is not a curse, but a gift, an ancient and living presence reminding us that beneath every light there is darkness, and within every darkness the seed of dawn. Here, at the edge of the abyss, the journey begins, Beneath the flickering glow of social mirrors, where faces multiply and shimmer like phantoms on restless water, the persona dances. It is the delicate mask we craft, an exquisite facade woven from the threads of expectation, fear, and longing. This mask protects us, a fragile armor against the coldness of judgment and the wildness of the unknown. Yet beneath its polished surface lies a prison, where the true self, like a silent bird, beats its wings against the bars of illusion. The persona is born from necessity, a clever survival mechanism formed in the crucible of childhood and societies. Gaze. It is the social mask that whispers, be acceptable, be lovable, be enough. It promises safety and belonging, but often demands the sacrifice of authenticity. It becomes a delicate architecture, a house of cards built on the sands of conformity, where every smile, every word, every gesture is calculated to maintain the fragile balance of appearance. But this mask is not merely a costume to be shed lightly. It is a complex symbol in the psyche's theater, a role assumed by the ego to navigate the outer world. In Jungian terms, the persona is the face we show to the world, the curated identity that negotiates social reality. Yet, it is also a veil that obscures the deeper self. Behind it, the soul waits, quiet, unseen, longing for acknowledgement. The persona's dance is graceful but weary. Each movement is choreographed by the desire to be seen without being truly known. It thrives in the flickering light of approval and the shadows of denial. It is both the mask and the mask maker, a paradox of concealment and expression. The ego clings to the persona, mistaking it for the self, confusing the role with reality. And so, the dance continues, a delicate illusion spun from the threads of fear and hope. Loneliness often hides beneath the persona's glow, for in wearing a mask, we separate ourselves from our authentic experience, from the rawness of our emotions and the fullness of our being. The persona demands silence from the parts of us that do not fit its script, the wild impulses, the wounds, the contradictions. These exiled fragments gather in the shadow, growing heavier with each denial. The social mirrors that reflect our personas are deceptive. They show us what we want to see or what others want us to be, but they never reveal the depths beneath. This reflection can become a prison of illusion, where the ego becomes trapped in an endless cycle of performance and pretense. The false self blooms, bright but brittle, like a flower pressed between pages, beautiful yet lifeless. Yet within this fragile construct lies the possibility of collapse, and from collapse, liberation. The breaking down of the persona's facade is often a painful, shattering experience. It may come as a crisis, a moment when the masks no longer fit, when the carefully maintained roles crumble like dry leaves underfoot. The ego, which once found comfort in control and appearance, faces the terrifying void of naked being. But this collapse is a necessary passage in the sacred journey of individuation. It is the symbolic death of the false self, a letting go of the known to embrace the unknown. The persona must fall away so that the authentic self may emerge from the ashes like a phoenix, reborn through fire and shadow. To witness the persona's dissolution is to confront the fragile nature of ego identity. The roles we have played, the faces we have worn, are not the essence of who we are. They are masks, sometimes helpful, sometimes harmful, that veil the deeper mystery of the self. In their absence, a profound emptiness may arise, but this emptiness is fertile ground, the chrysalis from which a new self takes shape. The process of unmasking calls for courage, the courage to face the vulnerability beneath the facade. It demands honesty, a willingness to meet the soul without pretense, to see oneself with compassionate eyes. This is not a rejection of the persona, but a transformation of its function. The mask need not be discarded entirely, but integrated consciously. becoming a servant rather than a master. In the sacred space between mask and self, the ego learns humility. It recognizes that identity is not fixed but fluid, a dance between appearance and essence. The persona can become a conscious costume, one that protects without imprisoning, that expresses without concealing. This balance is the gift of individuation, the harmonious interplay between the many faces we wear and the singular self that holds them all. The collapse of the false faces also reveals the shadow's presence lurking beneath. The parts we have hidden to maintain the persona's image are often those most alive and raw. When the mask falls, these shadow aspects rush forth, sometimes as discomfort, sometimes as liberation. To meet them is to deepen the dialogue with the unconscious, to invite the shadow into the light of awareness. This integration is the heart of the inner journey. It is the alchemical marriage of opposites, light and dark, mask and self, ego and shadow. Through this union, the psyche moves toward wholeness, healing the split between our public facade and private truth. The persona is no longer a prison, but a gateway, a bridge between inner and outer worlds. We see this in myth and story. The hero who must shed royal robes to walk barefoot among the people, the god who descends to the underworld and returns transformed. These archetypal narratives mirror our own soul's pilgrimage, the continual process of death and rebirth that shapes our identity. The social mirror, once a source of illusion, becomes a tool of reflection. We learn to see ourselves not only as others see us, but as we truly are, with all our shadows and light. This vision requires a tender gaze, an inner kindness that holds the broken and the whole simultaneously. Loneliness, too, transforms. It becomes a sacred solitude, a space where the soul listens deeply to its own voice, unmediated by external expectations. In this solitude, the true self begins to speak, its tone gentle but unwavering, calling us home from the masquerade. The dance of persona is not abandoned, but reimagined. We wear masks knowingly, with awareness of their nature and purpose. We choose which faces to present and when to reveal the nakedness beneath. This conscious embodiment is liberation, a reclaiming of our power to be both visible and authentic, connected and free. In this awakening, the ego surrenders its illusions of control and perfection. It learns that strength lies in vulnerability, that power flows from truth rather than pretense. The persona becomes a partner in the sacred dialogue of the self, a form that expresses the boundless spirit within. And so, beneath the flickering glow of social mirrors, the soul begins to dance a new dance, one that embraces the shadows, honors the light, and celebrates the mystery at the heart of all faces. The false masks dissolve not into emptiness, but into a deeper presence, an ever-unfolding expression of the self's radiant wholeness. Here begins the first step toward liberation, where the fragile ego meets its own truth and the soul breathes freely once again. There comes a time when the soul must descend into the cavernous depths where light is swallowed by shadow, where old identities dissolve like mist in the black morning. This descent is the nigredo, the alchemist's darkening, the primal blackness where all that once was certainty crumbles into formlessness. It is the psychic abyss, the silent underworld of despair and confusion, yet also the secret crucible, where transformation begins to stir. Imagine the soul as a flame flickering against the encroaching night. The ego's carefully constructed certainties, the persona, the known self, are now ashes, scattered by the winds of dissolution. What remains is the raw, unadorned darkness, a void that both terrifies and beckons. The nigredo is this sacred darkness, the blackened earth, where seeds of rebirth wait, buried beneath layers of shadow. This descent is not destruction, but a sacred collapse. It is the symbolic death that Jung spoke of, a necessary unmaking before The self can be remade. In this night, the ego's illusions fall away, and the soul faces its shadow in full confrontation. Here the fractured psyche lies exposed, stripped of defenses, raw and vulnerable. The nigredo is the dark night of the soul, a phrase whispered through centuries of mystics and seekers. It is the place where hope seems extinguished, where despair wraps its cold fingers around the heart. But within this darkness, the unconscious speaks in a new tongue, a language of symbols, dreams, and silent truths. It is here, in this void, that the inner alchemy unfolds. The blackness is the fertile soil of the psyche. Like the earth after a forest fire, it appears barren, yet beneath the surface, life is reawakening. This is the paradox of nigredo. From decay comes the compost of new life, from psychic death, the possibility of rebirth. The self, hidden beneath layers of shadow, begins to stir, preparing to emerge transformed. The descent into nigredo demands a courage of the deepest kind. It is a journey into the unknown, a surrender to the unconscious forces that shape our inner world. The ego, accustomed to control and certainty, now must relinquish its grip. It must dissolve its boundaries and enter the dark waters without resistance. This is the moment of enantiodromia, the turning of opposites. Light becomes dark, order descends into chaos, and in this reversal lies the seed of wholeness. The soul, torn between opposing forces, learns to hold contradiction without fear. The nigredo teaches that destruction and creation are intertwined, that death is but the shadow of life's renewal. Within this abyss, archetypes arise from the depths, the shadow in its rawest form, the trickster weaving illusions, the hermit withdrawing into solitude. These figures are guides and guardians, challenging the soul to confront its hidden wounds, its buried fears, and its denied truths. They are the dark companions on the alchemical journey. The imagery of the nigredo is rich with symbolism. The blackened crow, the serpent shedding its skin, the night sea without horizon. Each image calls us deeper into the mystery, inviting us to embrace the unknown and to trust the transformative power of darkness. This is the realm of the unconscious, where the soul's true work begins. Despair here is not a sign of defeat, but a threshold of awakening. It is the heavy rain before the spring, the silence before the dawn. The soul learns patience, surrendering to the slow, hidden processes of change. In this waiting, the chrysalis forms, a quiet containment where the self can gestate and grow anew. The nigredo is also a mirror of our deepest fears: abandonment, loss, fragmentation. These fears rise like shadows in the night, testing our resolve. Yet by facing them, the soul gains strength. The descent is a purification, a breaking down of false selves and illusions that no longer serve the journey. Through this sacred dark, the self moves closer to its essence. The false layers peel away like autumn leaves, revealing the core that is both fragile and eternal. This core is the self, the archetype of wholeness, the axis around which the psyche turns. It is the hidden sun beneath the night's veil. The process is not linear but cyclical. The nigredo may return in waves, each time peeling back more layers of egoic attachment. With each descent, the soul becomes more intimate with its shadow, more fluent in the language of dreams and symbols. The unconscious becomes a trusted companion rather than a feared abyss. In this sacred journey, the inner guide whispers, "Do not fear the darkness. It is the birthplace of light." The soul learns to navigate the night sea with eyes open, trusting the currents of transformation. The nigredo is both a crucible and a sanctuary, a place where the soul is forged in shadow and emerges stronger, more whole. The descent into psychic darkness is a rite of passage, an initiation into the mysteries of the self. It is the soul's confrontation with mortality, not of the body, but of identity, belief, and illusion. This death is a doorway, an opening onto a new horizon where light and shadow dance in eternal embrace. As the nigredo deepens, the soul begins to glimpse the glimmer of dawn, the first stirrings of albedo, the whitening, the cleansing light that follows the black night. This moment is fragile and precious, the first breath of rebirth after the suffocating dark. The journey through nigredo is solitary, yet profoundly connected. It links us to the great lineage of seekers who have walked this path, the mystics, shamans, poets, and alchemists who understood that to be truly alive, one must first be willing to die to the old self. In this descent, the soul learns that darkness is not the enemy, but the sacred ground of becoming. It is the silent forge where the ego is tempered, where the self is uncovered beneath the layers of mask and shadow. Here, the soul is invited to embrace the mystery, to surrender to the unknowable, and to trust the deep alchemy of transformation. Thus, the nigredo is not the end, but the sacred beginning. The darkness is not void, but a fertile womb, the crucible where the self is broken open and reshaped. It is the soul's journey into the blackness, a pilgrimage into the heart of shadow where despair and confusion give way to the quiet flame of awakening. The night may be long and the waters deep, but the soul moves forward, guided by an inner flame that neither flickers nor fades. This flame is the self, eternal and radiant, waiting beneath the darkness for the moment of rebirth. And when that moment comes, the soul rises from the nigredo, transformed and whole, ready to step into the light of a new day. We are born into a world that reflects us like a vast, trembling mirror. Yet this mirror is cracked, fractured by the shadows of our own making. In its shimmering surface, the faces we see are not merely other souls, but echoes of our own hidden depths, projections cast by the restless ego into the outer world. This is the realm where the self and the other dance in a delicate, often painful, interplay, a sacred theatre where what we refuse within ourselves takes form and shape outside, demanding to be seen, known, reclaimed. Projection is the ancient spell we weave, sometimes unconsciously, projecting onto others the dark fragments we refuse to own. Like a shadow cast long across the land at dusk, these projections blur the lines between inside and outside, self and other. We fall in love with illusions, the idealized, the demonized, and suffer because we mistake these reflections for truth. The beloved becomes a mask, the enemy a monstrous avatar, both conjured by the ego's need for separation and control. This chapter invites you to peer deeply into this cracked mirror, to recognize the dance of projection as the soul's desperate plea for wholeness. The other is not an enemy but a sacred mirror, bearing the fragments of ourselves lost to fear, denial, and pain. To see this is to awaken to a profound paradox. We are both the projector and the projected, the lover and the shadow lover, the healer and the wounded. The mirror's surface can be deceptive, a shimmering pool hiding turbulent currents below. When projections hold sway, we are caught in a web of illusion, mistaking shadows for substance. Our relationships become battlegrounds, our loves and hatreds fueled by unseen wounds buried deep within. Yet within this illusion lies the seed of liberation. When the mirror cracks, when the spell of projection is broken, something sacred begins to unfold. This breaking is the soul's calling to individuation, the journey to reclaim what was cast out, to bring the shadow home. Like Narcissus glimpsing his own image and falling captive, we must learn to gaze with new eyes, to see the other not as separate, but as part of the self's great mosaic. This recognition fractures the illusion of separateness, dissolving the walls that keep us trapped in loneliness and misunderstanding. The process is often painful, the shattering of familiar stories, the collapse of the ego's neat narratives. But through this pain, a deeper love emerges, a love grounded not in fantasy or fear, but in the raw, often messy truth of being human. This love embraces the contradictions, the shadow and light intertwined, the broken and the whole. It is the love that holds space for the self and other in their fullest complexity. In this sacred mirror work, the archetypes come alive, the anima and animus as bridges between conscious and unconscious, the trickster, revealing the illusions we cling to, the wise old man or woman guiding the soul to integration. Each figure appears as a facet of our inner world reflected in the outer, inviting us to deeper understanding and healing. Projection is the veil that separates ego from self, keeping us bound in cycles of judgment, blame, and denial. But when we learn to recognize our projections, to own our shadows instead of casting them out, the veil lifts. The unconscious speaks its language of symbols and stories, revealing the path to wholeness through reconciliation and acceptance. This journey inward mirrors the outer world's tumult. As individuals awaken from projection, societies too can begin to heal the fractures of division and misunderstanding. The personal and collective shadows are entwined. Healing one ripples into the other. The mirror that once trapped us in illusion can become a portal to greater empathy, connection, and truth. The pain of loving what is not real is a universal wound. We yearn to belong, to be seen and accepted, yet often cling to images that deny the complexity beneath. To love authentically is to face the shadows within and without, to hold the paradox of light and darkness in one embrace. It is the soul's deepest invitation to transformation. In the quiet moments of reflection, the soul learns to discern the difference between the projected and the authentic. The mirror cracks not to shatter us, but to free us, to reveal the lost parts yearning to return home. This return is the sacred reunion of ego and self, of fragmented souls becoming whole. The liberation born from this breaking is profound. It is the lifting of veils, the unveiling of truth, the emergence of the self's radiant core beyond masks and projections. The soul steps into a new light, one that embraces complexity, mystery, and the eternal dance of shadow and shine. To walk this path is to become a pilgrim of the inner landscape, a seeker who gazes fearlessly into the mirror's depths. It is to meet the other not as a threat or a savior, but as a sacred reflection of the self's hidden realms. This meeting holds the power to transform pain into wisdom, separation into unity. Projection thus becomes not a prison, but a threshold, the liminal space where the soul learns the art of reconciliation. It is here that the ego loosens its grip and the self begins to reclaim its lost fragments. The journey through the mirror's shadow leads to the emergence of a deeper, more compassionate awareness. In this sacred process, the soul discovers that the other is never truly lost nor separate. The dance of projection and return is the heartbeat of individuation, the unfolding of the self in its infinite complexity and beauty. So listen to the silence between the reflections, the stillness beneath the surface. Here lies the invitation to reclaim what has been cast away, to gather the scattered pieces and weave them into a tapestry of wholeness. The mirror may crack, but from its broken shards, the soul crafts a new vision, one radiant with truth, love, and the luminous shadow of transformation. Within the unfathomable depths of the unconscious, beyond the veil of waking consciousness, there dwell two ancient spirits, the anima and the animus. These are not mere figures, but archetypal forces, eternal lovers within the soul's hidden theatre. They move in a dance older than time itself, a dance of union and separation, fire and water, moon and sun. Here, in this sacred inner realm, the psyche confronts its most profound mystery, the alchemy of opposites, the anima, the inner feminine in the man's psyche, and the animus, the inner masculine within the woman, are the polar flames that light the path to wholeness. They are the unconscious's messengers, whispering truths that language cannot contain, guiding the ego beyond its rigid boundaries toward the expansive horizon of the self. Yet, they are also paradoxes, both nurturing and wild, familiar and strange, inviting and terrifying. To meet these archetypal lovers is to embark on a journey of profound transformation, a journey marked by the sacred principle of enantiodromia, the turning of opposites into each other. The soul learns that within the depths of darkness lies light, within passivity lies strength, within the feminine lies the masculine, and within the masculine, the feminine. This eternal interplay is the secret pulse beneath all psychic life, the hidden rhythm that calls the fragmented soul to return home. The anima and animus are not simply gendered figures, but symbolic expressions of the inner polarity that must be reconciled for the self to emerge. When they are ignored or repressed, they become shadows, distorted, projected, and feared. The anima may manifest as a phantom of longing, a muse that haunts the man's dreams, or as a destructive siren, luring him into illusion. The animus, when unintegrated, can become a tyrant within the woman's psyche, a voice of rigid control or harsh judgment. Yet these figures are also the soul's secret guides, the sacred bridges between ego and self. They invite us to cross the threshold into deeper dimensions of being, where identity dissolves and the dance of unity begins. The encounter with anima and animus is like the mythic descent into the underworld, a passage through shadow and fire that leads to rebirth. Imagine the psyche as a vast cathedral, its pillars carved from opposites, its stained glass windows, casting hues of light and shadow. The anima and animus are the sacred architects of this inner sanctuary, shaping the space where the fragmented soul may find sanctuary and healing. Their dance weaves the fabric of individuation, the soul's lifelong quest to integrate all its parts into a harmonious whole. This dance is not without struggle. The tension between anima and animus can erupt in inner conflict, a psychic storm that shakes the foundations of ego certainty. The ego, often resistant to change, clings to familiar patterns, fearing the dissolution of identity. Yet it is precisely through surrender to this dance, through embracing the paradoxes, that the soul is reborn. The process of integrating anima and animus is alchemical, a transformation of lead into gold within the psyche. It requires the courage to face the shadows they cast, to step beyond the familiar confines of persona and ego defenses. It is a sacred crucible where the old self dies and the new self is forged, where separation gives way to union. In myth, we see reflections of this sacred dance, the descent of Inanna into the underworld, shedding her veils one by one until she faces her shadow self. The journey of Psyche through trials to reunite with Eros, embodying the union of soul and spirit. These stories mirror the inner alchemy of anima and animus, a journey through loss, suffering, and ultimately, love transformed. The anima's essence is often linked to the moon, mysterious, reflective, and deeply connected to the cycles of nature and psyche. She embodies the emotional, the intuitive, the dreamlike realms that nourish the soul's depths. The animus, by contrast, is akin to the sun, radiant, penetrating, the bearer of logos and rationality. Yet, these are not fixed qualities. They intermingle, blend, and call forth the soul's creative potential. In the sacred space between anima and animus, the psyche finds its heartbeat, the rhythm of reconciliation and renewal. Here, the fragmented ego glimpses the luminous self, a beacon beyond duality. The union of these archetypes is the promise of psychic wholeness, a harmonious dance of masculine and feminine energies within the soul's vast ocean. The anima and animus also serve as guides to the unconscious, opening doors to hidden realms where forgotten memories, archetypal images, and ancestral wisdom reside. They invite us to listen deeply to the language of symbols, to hear the silence beneath the noise, and to honor the sacred mystery that underpins all life. To embrace these inner lovers is to awaken the soul's creative fire, a flame that burns away illusion and lights the path to individuation. It is to learn the sacred art of balance, to dance between shadow and light, chaos and order, desire and restraint. This is the heart of the Jungian journey, a pilgrimage into the unknown, guided by the eternal dance of anima and animus. The path is neither linear nor easy. It is marked by moments of despair and ecstasy, by collapse and rebirth, by the relentless call to face what we have long denied. Yet in this sacred process, the soul finds its true home, a place where opposites no longer oppose but embrace, where the self unfolds in its fullest expression. As you walk this inner path, remember the words of the alchemists who saw in the union of opposites the key to transformation. They spoke of the conjunctio, the sacred marriage, where the dark bride and bright bridegroom unite in a cosmic dance. This mystical union is the heart of anima and animus, the soul's sacred covenant with itself. Let your heart open to their call, the whisper of mystery beneath the surface of your being. Allow yourself to be drawn into their dance, to surrender to the sacred paradox they embody. In doing so, you step beyond the confines of ego and enter the radiant realm of self, a place where all opposites find harmony, and the soul's journey is made whole. Here, in this inner sanctum, the anima and animus weave their eternal song, a melody of shadow and light, separation and union, death and rebirth. It's a song that calls you home, to the sacred heart of your own being, where the eternal lovers await. The shadow waits. Silent, patient, and often unseen, it moves at the edges of consciousness like a half-forgotten melody, a flicker in the peripheral vision of the soul. It is no mere darkness, no simple void to be feared or cast aside, but a vital twin, the other half of the self, buried deep beneath the ego's bright facade. This shadow carries the weight of forgotten desires, the secrets of buried wounds, the raw and primal parts of our being that the light of awareness often shies away from. To encounter the shadow is to step into a dance older than time, a sacred meeting where fear and curiosity entwine like lovers in a twilight embrace. It is here, in this liminal space between what is known and unknown, that the soul begins to stir with the possibility of healing, a healing born not from denial, but from acknowledgement. The shadow's cry is a call, a summons to return what has been lost or rejected, and in this return lies the reclamation of power and wholeness. Imagine the psyche as a vast, dark forest, thick with mist and shadow, where the light of the ego's conscious mind is a lone lantern flickering uncertainly. The shadow dwells within this forest, not as an enemy to be destroyed, but as a guardian of mysteries, a keeper of truths too raw for the surface. It is the realm where the soul's hidden stories reside, stories of pain, passion, rage, and sorrow, as well as untapped creativity and unspoken longings. The dance with the shadow begins often with fear, the primal fear of what lurks in the dark, the dread of losing control or being consumed. Yet beneath this fear lies a profound curiosity, a deep yearning to know oneself fully, without masks or illusions. This dual movement of aversion and attraction is the essence of the shadow's dance. It is the soul's way of inviting us to go beyond the surface, beyond the ego's fragile constructions, into the fertile soil of the unconscious. To face the shadow is to confront the parts of ourselves we have disowned, the rage we deemed unacceptable, the envy we suppressed, the desires we denied, the shame we buried deep. These are the shadow's tokens, its language of pain and protection. But within these tokens also lies a hidden treasure, the energy of vitality, authenticity, and wholeness waiting to be reclaimed. Carl Jung called the shadow the dark twin because it mirrors the ego's light, revealing the polarity within. The psyche. Without the shadow, the ego's light is incomplete, a fragile flame flickering in the wind. The shadow balances this light, grounding it in the reality of the whole self. It is the wellspring of the unconscious, the source of both our deepest wounds and our greatest strength. The meeting with the shadow often feels like a descent, a plunge into the underworld of the psyche where silence reigns and the familiar dissolves. Like Orpheus descending into Hades, the soul ventures into the realm of darkness, guided by the hope of retrieval. This descent is a symbolic death, a necessary collapse of the ego's certainty that clears space for rebirth. In this darkened realm, the shadow reveals itself not as a monster, but as a teacher, a harsh but loving guide who knows the paths of healing. It calls us to witness the parts of ourselves we have hidden away, to sit with the discomfort of facing what has been denied. And as we listen, as we bear witness, the shadow begins to soften, its cry turning from anguish to a whispered invitation. Come home! The home the shadow calls us to is the self, the totality of being where light and dark are no longer opposed but embraced. Here, in this sacred space, the soul learns the alchemy of transformation, where the shadow's leaden weight is transmuted into the gold of insight and integration. This process is not easy. It requires courage to stay in the presence of discomfort, to hold the paradox of love and fear, acceptance and resistance. The shadow's dance is a dance of surrender, surrendering the illusion of control and opening to the mystery of the unknown within. It is the breaking of the ego's brittle shell, the cracking of the facade that no longer serves. Yet, within this surrender lies power, the power to reclaim what was lost, to gather the scattered fragments of the self and weave them into a new tapestry of wholeness. The shadow's cry is not a wail of defeat, but a song of potential, a melody of rebirth that echoes through the caverns of the soul. The mythic echoes of this encounter resound in stories from every culture. The hero's descent into the abyss, the goddess's journey through the dark night, the phoenix's fall into ashes before rising anew. These myths mirror the soul's inner journey with the shadow, reminding us that from darkness comes light, from loss comes gain, from death comes life. In the sacred dance with the shadow, we learn to see beyond duality, to recognize that darkness is not separate from light, but its necessary counterpart. The shadow holds the energy of life's hidden depths, the primal force that fuels creativity, passion, and transformation. When we acknowledge the shadow, we begin to unravel the illusions that bind us, the stories of inadequacy, the masks of perfection, the judgments that fracture our soul. We open to a deeper truth, the truth of being imperfect, whole, and deeply human. This acknowledgement is the first step toward healing. It is the moment when fear begins to dissolve into understanding, when resistance softens into acceptance. The shadow's cry becomes a call to integration, inviting the soul to reclaim its lost parts and step into a fuller expression of being. In this encounter, the ego learns humility, the humility to admit it does not hold all the answers, the courage to embrace its shadowy counterpart as a vital ally. The shadow, once feared and shunned, becomes a companion on the path of individuation, guiding the soul toward its true center. The dance continues, ever unfolding, as the soul moves through cycles of recognition, resistance, surrender, and integration. Each encounter with the shadow deepens the journey, revealing new layers of complexity and beauty. To walk this path is to embrace the sacred paradox of human existence, to hold both light and dark, joy and sorrow, strength and vulnerability. It is to step beyond the confines of the ego's narrow vision and into the vast, mysterious landscape of the self. The shadow's dance is the dance of life itself, the eternal movement between concealment and revelation, death and rebirth, fragmentation and wholeness. It is the soul's invitation to come home, to embrace its hidden depths, and to find in the unseen self the source of power, healing, and love. So listen closely to the whisper in the dark, the shadow's subtle call. It is not a voice of terror, but a song of promise. A promise that beyond the abyss lies the light of a deeper self, waiting to be known and loved. Step forward with courage, for the shadow's dance is the sacred dance of becoming. It is the heart of the journey toward wholeness, the pathway through darkness to the radiant dawn of the self. The world retreats like a fading tide, and you find yourself standing at the threshold of solitude, a silent sanctuary carved from the wilderness within. Here, the hermit's path unfolds, not as punishment or loss, but as pilgrimage and sacred exile. It is a withdrawal, yes, but not into emptiness. Rather, it is a descent into the vast interior landscape where the soul, stripped of distraction, may speak in its own true voice. Imagine the psyche as a dense forest cloaked in mist, where the ego's clamor, its endless dialogues, ambitions, and masks, grows faint, replaced by a profound silence. This silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of something deeper, the whisper of the self, a steady flame glowing in the heart of the fog. The hermit moves slowly here, each step a deliberate turning away from the world's mirrors, and into the shadowed depths of being. Solitude is often feared as loneliness, yet within Jung's vision, it is the sacred womb wherein the self awakens beyond the ego's grasp. The ego, that fragile construction of identity and control, dissolves here like morning mist. Without its familiar shape, the soul is left raw and vulnerable, but also infinitely free. The hermit's path is a confrontation with this paradox. To lose oneself in silence, to finally find oneself whole, this journey inward resembles the myth of the hero who must enter the cave, the mountain, the desert, places of isolation where the world's noise is stripped away. Like Elijah on the mountain or the Buddha beneath the Bodhi tree, the seeker faces the abyss not with fear, but with reverence, knowing that only in solitude can the seed of illumination sprout. The dark night of the soul, once feared, becomes the fertile ground where the light of insight begins to glow. Within this solitude, the soul encounters its own depths, the unconscious, vast and mysterious as the night sky. Here lie the archetypes, those eternal figures that dance beyond time, the wise old man, the eternal child, the Mother Earth, the trickster. The hermit learns to listen to these voices, not through words but through symbols, dreams, and the language of the soul. It is a dialogue of mystery, a sacred conversation where the self reveals itself not in noise but in nuance, not in certainty but in paradox. The hermit's flame is not a raging fire but a steady glow, a beacon that does not seek to conquer the darkness but to illuminate it gently. This flame is the inner light of consciousness that sees beyond the ego's illusions, recognizing the unity behind all opposites. It is the dawning awareness that the self is not a fixed entity, but a living process, forever unfolding in the embrace of solitude. To walk the hermit's path is to embrace both exile and homecoming. It is an exile from the endless demands of the persona, the false faces worn to please the world. Yet it is also a return to the true home within, the center of the soul, where the eternal self resides. This home is not found in outward achievement or recognition, but in the quiet depths of being, where time slows and the soul breathes freely. In solitude, the hermit confronts the enantiodromia, the turning of opposites within themselves. The restless ego finds peace. The chaos within settles into harmony. The pain of separation transforms into the bliss of union as the soul surrenders the illusion of control and opens to the mystery of what is. Here, in the sacred quiet, the psyche begins its alchemical work, weaving light and shadow into a tapestry of wholeness. The hermit's path teaches us that solitude is not the absence of connection, but the presence of a deeper communion with the self, with the unconscious, with the archetypal forces that shape our inner world. It is in this communion that the soul finds its true nourishment, a sustenance beyond the fleeting pleasures and distractions of the outer world. As the hermit moves deeper into the wilderness within, the outer world fades, not in absence, but in importance. The false idols of egoic desire lose their grip, and a new vision arises, one that sees beyond separation to the interconnectedness of all things. The hermit becomes a bridge between worlds, a keeper of sacred knowledge, a witness to the unfolding mystery of the self. This path demands courage and patience, for the journey through solitude is long and often lonely. Yet it offers a gift unlike any other, the awakening of inner illumination, a light that does not flicker or fade but burns steadily through the soul's fog. This light is the pulse of the eternal self, calling gently through the silence, inviting the soul to awaken from its slumber and remember its true nature. The hermit's path is a call to all who seek beyond the surface, beyond the noise of the world and the illusions of the ego. It is a sacred invitation to step into the wilderness of the soul, to embrace solitude not as loss, but as the cradle of rebirth. In this sacred exile, the soul learns to listen, to see, to be, fully and deeply, beyond all masks and shadows. So, walk slowly now with reverence and openness. Let the quiet engulf you like a gentle tide. Hear the steady flame within, glowing softly against the vastness of your inner night. Here in this sacred solitude the self awaits, timeless, radiant, whole. In the secret forge of the soul, beneath the trembling veil of dawn, a sacred alchemy unfolds. An ancient dance of opposites, weaving light and shadow, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious, into a single flame. This is the conjunctio, the alchemical marriage, where what once seemed divided and distant draws near, embracing in a union that transcends all boundaries. Here, the psyche is both crucible and chrysalis, burning and birthing the radiant self that rises timeless, like the phoenix from its ashes. Imagine the soul as a great tapestry, threads of darkness entwined with strands of light, each necessary to the whole. The masculine and feminine energies, often cast as adversaries in the theatre of consciousness, meet now in the silent sanctum of the inner temple. They circle, they hesitate, like star-crossed lovers, aware that their embrace will both shatter and heal. This meeting is not a conquest, but a sacred yielding, an invitation to surrender the ego's demand for separation, to dissolve the false polarity that has held the self captive. The masculine, with its sharp edges, its fiery clarity and relentless forward motion, represents the principle of conscious assertion, the ego's will to know, to shape, to control. The feminine, deep and mysterious as the ocean's depths, carries the unconscious wisdom, the fertile void where creation stirs in silence. In their union, these forces do not annihilate but transform, becoming an alchemical whole where opposites are no longer in conflict but in conversation. This marriage is the heart of individuation, that lifelong pilgrimage to wholeness described by Jung, the crossing of the inner abyss where fragmented selves find reconciliation. It is a symbolic death and rebirth, a phoenix cycle where the ego dies to its illusions and is reborn in the light of the self. In this sacred crucible, the persona's brittle masks melt away, revealing the living gold beneath. The conjunctio is paradox incarnate, both destruction and creation, loss and gain, silence and song. It is the dissolution of duality and the emergence of unity, the cosmic dance where the veil between heaven and earth thins and the soul glimpses its divine nature. This union calls to the mythic echoes of Isis and Osiris, the sacred hieros gamos that births the world anew. The alchemical wedding is not merely a psychological event, but a cosmic rhythm, the pulse of transformation beating in the heart of the universe. Within this sacred union, the shadow too is invited to the feast, no longer cast out, but embraced. As an integral partner, the darkness within is not a foe to be vanquished, but a source of depth and power. The wellspring of creativity and renewal, the shadow's hidden desires and wounds mingle with the conscious light, forging a new synthesis, a self that is whole, complex, and radiant. This transformative marriage requires courage, the courage to face inner contradictions, to sit with the tension of opposites without rushing to judgment or escape. It demands patience, for the alchemical process is slow, a gradual unraveling of old patterns and the weaving of new. Like the blacksmith who tempers steel in fire, the soul is refined in the heat of this sacred union, emerging tempered, flexible, alive. The imagery of fire is never far from the alchemical marriage. It is fire that consumes and fire that illuminates, the purifying flame that burns away the dross of egoic attachments, revealing the pure gold of the self. This fire is both destruction and illumination, a paradox that mirrors the soul's journey through darkness into light. In the quiet moments of this inner marriage, a new voice emerges, the voice of the self, speaking not in the language of fear or separation, but in the poetry of wholeness. This voice carries the wisdom of ages, the song of the phoenix, the harmony of the spheres. It calls the soul home, beyond fragmentation, beyond illusion, into the sacred embrace of being fully alive. The alchemical marriage is also a mirror reflecting the outer world. The inner union of opposites invites us to see beyond the binaries, imposed by culture and mind, to recognize the sacred balance that underlies all creation. It whispers that the tensions we endure are invitations to transformation, that every fracture holds the seed of healing. As the masculine and feminine within entwine, they weave a new pattern in the fabric of consciousness, one of integration and grace, strength and softness, clarity and mystery. This pattern is the blueprint of the individuated self, a living symbol of psychic wholeness. This union is never static. It is a dynamic dance, an eternal ebb and flow. The alchemical marriage is a journey without end, a sacred spiral that leads deeper and deeper into the mystery of self and soul. It is a pilgrimage marked by symbolic deaths and rebirths, by the continual weaving of light and shadow, flesh and spirit. So, let the soul enter this crucible with open heart and steady breath. Let the ancient forces of union draw near and witness the sacred alchemy that unfolds when opposites embrace. Here, in the fire of the self, the phoenix rises, resplendent, whole, and free, beyond the shifting tides of persona and shadow, beyond the flickering images cast by the unconscious. There exists a stillness, an eternal center, vast as the cosmos and intimate as the breath. This is the self, the ground of being upon which all else arises and returns. It is not merely a concept or a distant ideal, but the living pulse of wholeness that beats beneath the fractured dance of ego and identity. To glimpse the self is to encounter the infinite within, the sacred heart, where all opposites reconcile and the soul awakens to its cosmic dance. Imagine a silent lake at dawn, its surface unruffled, reflecting the boundless sky above. The self is this lake, deep, still, holding the depths where stars of meaning shimmer in quiet harmony. It is both the source and the destination of the soul's journey, the unbroken circle in which the drama of life unfolds and dissolves. Here the ego's ceaseless striving softens, its fragile fortress dissolves, and the soul remembers its ancient home. Jung taught us that the self is the archetype of wholeness, the ultimate synthesis of all psychic opposites, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious. It is the axis mundi of the psyche, the sacred center around which individuation spirals. Individuation is the soul's pilgrimage toward this center, a sacred unfolding in which every fragment, every wound, every hidden desire is gathered and embraced into a new unity. To dance with the self is to move beyond the illusion of separateness, to surrender to the cosmic rhythm that pulses through all existence. This dance is ancient and eternal, a swirling spiral of becoming that enfolds time and space, birth and death, creation and destruction. It is the dance of the phoenix and the ouroboros, of dawn and dusk, where beginnings and endings merge in sacred union. The ego, that necessary yet limited structure of identity, often resists this dance, clinging to its illusions of control and separation. But the self beckons with a deeper call, a call to release the fractured self-images, to descend into the depths where true transformation awaits. This descent is not a loss, but a finding, a symbolic death that opens the way to rebirth, where the soul rises renewed, crowned with the light of wisdom and compassion. In this meeting with the self, the paradox of identity unfolds. We are both, infinite and finite, eternal and temporal, the dancer and the dance. The self does not abolish the ego, but transcends it, weaving it into a larger tapestry where all parts find their place. This integration is the heart of healing, the restoration of harmony within, the reconciliation of conflict, the awakening to a consciousness that is vast and tender. The self's sovereignty is gentle yet absolute. It is not a tyrant, but a wise king or queen who rules with compassion and insight. Its realm is the inner kingdom, where the soul's mysteries unfold like petals beneath the sun. Here the soul learns to listen deeply to the whispers of dreams, the language of symbols, the silent song of being. In this listening, the soul becomes a sacred vessel, open to the mysteries of existence. The cosmic dance of the self is mirrored in the world around us. The cycles of nature, the movements of the stars, the rhythm of the seasons, all reflect the eternal pattern of individuation. This pattern invites us to see our own lives as part of a greater whole, as threads woven into the grand tapestry of the cosmos. We are not isolated islands, but living cells in the body of the universe. The journey toward the self is marked by trials and triumphs, by moments of despair and illumination. It calls us to confront our shadows, to embrace our vulnerabilities, to transcend our fears. In this sacred alchemy, the soul is purified and refined, emerging as a radiant beacon of light and love. In the final awakening to the self, the soul recognizes its place within the cosmic order, not as a separate entity struggling for existence, but as an integral note in the symphony of life. This awakening brings peace, a deep, abiding peace that flows from the knowing that we are held always in the embrace of the eternal. Thus, the self is both destination and journey, center and circumference, silence and song. It is the sacred mystery that calls us home, the eternal dance that invites us to step fully into the fullness of being. To know the self is to know the universe reflected within, and to become a living mirror of its infinite grace. Let the soul now rest in this profound truth, the quiet sovereignty of the self, and hear the gentle pulse of the cosmic dance, inviting, welcoming, eternal. Here, in this sacred center, the soul awakens fully, radiant and whole, ready to move forward in harmony with the endless rhythm of life. There comes a moment in the journey where the soul, worn by extremes, finds itself caught in the sacred spiral of enantiodromia, the turning of opposites within, the ancient law whispered by the depths of the psyche. Like day folding into night, like the slow unraveling of flame into ash, this inner rhythm is a cosmic dance of reversal, a paradox where what once was denied or repressed rises again, transformed and unexpected. Imagine a great river, swollen by storms, raging with force beyond its banks. Yet beneath that torrent, the current twists and coils, turning back on itself, carving new channels in the bedrock of the soul. This is enantiodromia, the inevitable return of the repressed, the shadow erupting from its subterranean lair, the obsession unraveling into its opposite, the denial becoming acknowledgement. The psyche, in its profound wisdom, guards balance by this secret law. When one force grows too dominant, the rigid ego, the fiery rage, the icy withdrawal, it plants the seed of its opposite deep within the unconscious. This seed, nourished by neglect and repression, grows slowly, patiently, until it emerges, with the force of a storm, demanding recognition and integration. Here begins the alchemy of surrender. The soul must release its tight grasp on certainty, dissolve the brittle defenses of persona, and face the paradox that the very thing once feared or rejected holds the key to liberation. Obsession becomes a mirror reflecting the unseen, repression a shadow guiding toward light, projection a fractured lens inviting the return of lost parts. In this sacred inversion, the soul learns that extremes are not enemies but midwives of transformation. The night's darkest hour births the dawn, the breaking point where identity fractures becomes the crucible where wholeness is forged anew. To embrace enantiodromia is to step willingly into the mystery of paradox, to see that within every ending lies a beginning, within every death, a rebirth. Consider the mythic image of the phoenix, consumed by flames, its body reduced to ash, only to rise again, renewed and radiant. This is the soul's paradox incarnate. The ego, in its pride, may resist the consuming fire, but the deeper self knows that only through such destruction can true renewal arise. The old patterns, worn and brittle, must burn away so the new may take root. Enantiodromia is also the dance of light and shadow within us, each demanding presence, each calling for balance. The unconscious speaks in symbols, dreams, and sudden insights that often feel like contradictions. It invites us to hold the tension of opposites without fear, to sit with the discomfort of ambiguity, and to trust the unfolding process that leads beyond duality. This inner spiral is not a smooth path, but a winding labyrinth, where surrender does not mean defeat, but the courage to face one's own depths without flinching. It is a descent into the chrysalis, where identity unravels, and the soul is reimagined in new forms, more fluid, more whole, more alive. Through this turning within, the soul discovers that repression and obsession are not enemies, but messengers, signs, that something vital remains unseen, unlived, or unclaimed. Projection, too, serves as a fractured mirror, offering glimpses of what lies hidden within. When the mirror cracks and the projections fall away, the soul gathers these scattered fragments into a new mosaic of being. The paradox of enantiodromia teaches that surrender is not weakness, but strength, that chaos is the womb of order, that the night's silence holds the seeds of morning's song. It is the sacred law that guards the soul's transformation, the rhythm that pulses beneath every cycle of life and death. In this knowing, the soul learns to dance with its opposites, to hold light and dark, joy and sorrow, love and fear in a sacred embrace. This dance is the heart of individuation, the unfolding of the self beyond the ego's narrow borders into the vastness of wholeness. Let the soul rest now in this paradox, this sacred turning within, and hear the quiet song of enantiodromia, the eternal spiral where opposites meet, dissolve, and birth the new. Here lies the promise of transformation, the hope of rebirth, and the unfolding of the self in its infinite dance. There is a wound within each of us, an ancient mark etched deep into the flesh of the soul. It is not merely injury or sorrow, but a sacred fissure, a breach where the false self cracks open to reveal the hidden depths beneath. This wound, tender and raw, pulses with the paradox of pain and promise, suffering and grace. It is the sacred wound, the crucible where transformation is born. Imagine the soul as a vast and ancient forest, where beneath the canopy of persona and ego lies the dark soil of the unconscious. Here, in the shadows and silence, the sacred wound resides like a hidden spring, often concealed beneath layers of denial, guarded by defenses woven from fear and shame. Yet when the wound is touched, when pain is truly felt, the soul begins to bleed not only sorrow but a strange, luminous light. Pain, the psyche teaches us, is not an enemy to be conquered or escaped. It is a teacher, a guide who stands at the threshold of awakening. Like the mythic hero who must pass through the underworld, we are called to enter our own depths, to embrace the darkness and surrender to the unknown. Only then does the old self dissolve and the chrysalis of transformation unfolds. The sacred wound invites us to release illusions, the shimmering veils of control, perfection, and separation. It strips away the comforting masks of the persona, revealing the raw, unvarnished truth beneath. This truth is neither beautiful nor easy, but it is real. It is the soil from which new life, new compassion, new strength can grow. In Jungian terms, this wound is the shadow made visible, the unacknowledged parts of ourselves crying out for integration. It is the psychic scar where the self meets its own fracture, where the journey toward wholeness begins. The wound carries the echo of loss and betrayal, abandonment and grief, yet also the possibility of profound healing. Through pain, the soul encounters its limits and its infinite capacity. The wound is a threshold between what was and what might be. It is here that the ego learns humility, and the self extends its arms to gather what was once shattered. In this sacred space, the paradox of suffering and strength intertwine, each giving birth to the other. Visualize a flame flickering in a cave's darkness, fragile yet persistent, casting shadows that dance on the walls. This flame is the sacred wound's light, a beacon of inner illumination. It reveals the contours of hidden fears and forgotten desires, inviting the soul to tend it with tenderness and courage. The path through the sacred wound is neither linear nor painless. It is a spiral descent into the labyrinth of the psyche, where the soul meets pain as both foe and friend. Each layer of suffering, each tear shed, is a step closer to the wellspring of compassion deep within. Here, the soul learns that vulnerability is not weakness, but the language of strength. In myth, the sacred wound often appears as the hero's mark, the spear that pierces the side, the arrow that strikes the heart. It is a symbol of sacrifice, of death and rebirth entwined. Through this wound, the hero gains the wisdom of the flesh and the courage of the spirit, emerging transformed, bearing the scars that testify to survival and growth. The sacred wound dissolves old patterns, those repetitive cycles of pain and avoidance that imprison the soul in shadow. It calls us to awaken dormant wells within, the wells of empathy, patience, and fierce resilience. To embrace this wound is to claim the fullness of the human experience, with all its beauty and terror. In the silence after pain, the soul listens, deeply. It hears the whisper of the self, the eternal center that holds the broken parts in compassionate embrace. This is the place where healing is not erasure, but integration, where scars become sacred maps, guiding the journey onward. The sacred wound teaches us that suffering is not punishment, but a rite of passage. It is the alchemical fire that burns away illusions and refines the spirit. In the midst of pain, the soul finds a strange grace, a fierce, quiet power, born from having touched the depths and chosen to rise again. So let the soul rest now in this tender space of pain and possibility. Let it honor the sacred wound, the gate through which transformation flows. Here, in the crucible of suffering, the soul awakens to its true nature, resilient, compassionate, and whole. And from this place, the journey continues, ever deeper, into the mystery of self, ever closer to the radiant heart of wholeness. The journey comes full circle, not as a line drawn neatly from beginning to end, but as a spiral, ever turning, ever deepening, folding upon itself like the petals of a sacred lotus unfolding in the dawn. Here, in this quiet turning, the fragmented self gathers its scattered pieces, worn and weathered by the trials of shadow and light, to find renewal in the embrace of wholeness. Individuation is no final destination, no fixed point to be reached. It is the sacred dance, the alchemical marriage, where the many selves within begin to sing in harmony, each voice acknowledging its other, each shadow folding back into the light. It is a path of humility, where the ego's illusions dissolve like mist under the morning sun, revealing the vast landscape of the self, eternal and boundless. Picture the soul as a river, once fractured by the jagged stones of fear and denial, now flowing freely toward the ocean of unity. Each encounter with the shadow, each descent into the unconscious has carved the riverbed deeper, shaping the contours of identity not as rigid walls, but as fluid currents moving toward integration. This is the path of return, a pilgrimage inward and outward, a journey both ancient and ever new. The self, that eternal center beyond masks and personas, awaits not as a prize, but as a companion, an ever-present pulse beneath the surface of consciousness. To walk the path of individuation is to learn the rhythm of this pulse, to attune oneself to the cosmic dance of opposites, light and dark, masculine and feminine, order and chaos. It is to understand that wholeness emerges not from the denial of fragmentation, but through its sacred reconciliation. There is a profound grace in this journey, a softening of the soul that allows the ego to surrender its grasp on control, to embrace the mystery of becoming. This surrender is not defeat but victory, the paradox of strength found in vulnerability, of power rooted in compassion. It is the flowering of spirit born from the soil of suffering and the water of wisdom. Envision a great tree standing in a silent forest. Its roots delve deep into the earth's shadowed depths, while its branches reach toward the infinite sky. Such is the soul returning, grounded in the lessons of the shadow, yet reaching ever upward to the light of consciousness. Each leaf, each ring within its trunk, tells a story of cycles endured, of death and rebirth, of the sacred spiral of transformation. This path of return is a weaving, a tapestry of experience where every thread, no matter how frayed or dark, contributes to the integrity of the whole. The fragmented self, once a tapestry torn, now finds in its tears the threads of healing and integration. Here in this sacred weave, the soul's quiet song arises, a melody of completion and infinite becoming. Individuation calls us to walk gently, to honor the paradox that in seeking ourselves we find both nothing and everything. It is a path where humility and courage dance together, where the soul learns to rest in the silence beyond knowing, in the vastness beyond form. It is a journey without end, where each ending is also a beginning, each death a doorway to new life. The light within flickers steadily now, no longer a fragile flame, but a steady fire burning deep in the heart's sanctuary. This fire warms the soul, illuminating the path with a clarity born of acceptance and love. It is the light of the self, quiet, sovereign, eternal. And so the soul returns, not as one who has conquered, but as one who has come home to the sacred circle where all opposites are held in balance, where the dance of individuation continues in endless grace. Here, the journey is both complete and beginning, a sacred unfolding where the self and the cosmos sing in harmony, and the soul at last knows itself as whole. Video description. In the twilight realm of the psyche, the shadow stirs, not as a foe, but as a silent guardian of the soul's hidden truths. This video journeys into the sacred dusk, where the ego's masks dissolve, revealing the darkened soil of the unconscious. Here, beneath layers of persona and pride, lies the shadow, the unseen twin that carries our denied fears, desires, and potentials. To meet this shadow is to stand at the edge of transformation, where psychic death precedes rebirth, and the self begins its sacred pilgrimage toward wholeness. Drawing from Carl Jung's profound insights, we explore the alchemical process of nigredo, the sacred wound, and the collapse of false selves, rituals of psychic death that strip away illusion and awaken the soul's radiant depth. The journey is arduous, marked by paradox. The shadow is both torment and liberation, despair and hope, fragmentation and healing. But it is within this crucible of darkness that the self unfolds, steady, sovereign, and eternal. Join us in this contemplative exploration of individuation, where the delicate dance between persona and shadow becomes the gateway to authentic being. May this encounter inspire you to listen deeply to your own shadow's whisper, to embrace vulnerability as strength, and to walk gently the path of inner transformation. If this resonated with your journey, please share your thoughts or experiences below. How has the shadow revealed itself to you? Hashtags: Carl Jung, shadow work, individuation, Jungian psychology, psychic transformation, nigredo, sacred wound, persona and shadow, inner alchemy, Jungian depth psychology.